Welcome to the 30th video in our series about Unix tools. In this video, I will show you how to use a few miscellaneous utilities that haven't really fit into earlier videos, but which are used often. These include uname, head, tail, touch, and stat. So let's get started. If I can get the focus on the right window. There we go. So uname was the first one. And if you ask for some help on uname, you'll see there isn't any really exciting help. But we've got some. So what can we do? Basically, you always want -a. These other ones are used in shell scripting. But from the command line, you want to do a uname -a. Let's take a look at what all you can learn. It's the Linux system. It's 64-bit and it's an Intel AMD type CPU. We know that it supports symmetric multiprocessing, and the kernel version is 6.636, and this other stuff is distribution specific. It says it's a long-term stable. And we can tell, okay, this is Alpine Linux. Alpine Linux is a special distribution that's extra small, and it uses BusyBox instead of core utils. The host name is Pain. And this tells you when the kernel was compiled. Okay. Uname is a quick way to find out, are you Alpine, are you Ubuntu, are you some other Linux. And it also will let you know, if you're logged in remotely, are you 64-bit, and is it an AMD, is it an ARM, is it a Spark? What kind of CPU does this machine have? Wonderful. That's all you need to know about uname. Let's talk about head. As you know, video 30 is a text file that you saw when we started the video. When you have a text file, sometimes it's large. This one is small and fits on the screen. But if you had a large one, you might not want to look at the whole file. You might want to look at just some of the file. To identify what's in the file, usually you look at the beginning of the file. So if we said head, we would learn that head by default prints the first 10 lines of a file. And you can list more than one file, and it will show each one with a file name header. There are some options here. So let's try them with some text files. Do we have anything? Well, nothing here looks really large, but video 18 seems to have the most. Let's see how many lines are in it. We know WC from an earlier video. Okay, that has 79 lines. So let's try head video 18 text. And you can see we got 10 lines. If you're not sure, you can count the output. But there it is. The first 10 lines. Well, sometimes you don't want 10 lines. Sometimes, in this case, the first line would be enough to tell you that this is one of the files describing our series. So we can do head, and we can say the number of lines I want is just 1. And that will print the first line. You can also say tail. And you think, what is tail? Well, let's take a look. Tail prints the last 10 lines of the file, or we can specify how many. So let's look at the last part of video 18, and you can see that's the end of the file. And maybe we only want the last 5 lines. We can get just the last 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So head and tail allow you to look at the beginning and the end of text files. Tail is used a lot for log files. If your application creates some log, you can see the last few messages in the log with tail. To identify text files and say, oh, I can't remember what's in there, head is used a lot. So we've looked at 3 utilities so far. Let's go back and make sure we know what our goal is. Uname done, head done, tail done. We've got touch and stat. Stat is the easier one, so let's look at that first. When you do an ls-l for the long listing, you get some timestamp information and some permission information. We know by default this is the last modified timestamp, but there's also a last access timestamp, and on some file systems a creation timestamp. How do we find out more about the different timestamps without having to go read about ls? And I want to see all the timestamps, not just one. Well, there's a special command called stat. And you see it scrolled off the screen. It's too long. Let's use our magic. Okay, and it tells you display file or file system status. We haven't talked about file systems yet, so let's stick to files. How about this backup? We know that this backup file was last modified on July 2nd at 4:13 local time. But if we typed in stat backup Friday tar xz, we get a lot more information. We can see that we get the name, we get the size, which was here, and it's here. We find out it's a regular file, which if you're sharp, you know that from the minus at the beginning of the line. Then it shows the permissions in the modern way, and it also shows the permissions in octal, which is necessary if you're a C programmer. It'll tell you the username and the group name, but it also tells you the identifier number. Again, if you're programming at a low level, sometimes you need the number. And we see the last access time, the last modify time, and the last change time. Most of the time, you'll be using some ext4 file system, and the modify and change times will match. But the access time will be different on some systems. What is this? This is the 4-digit year, and remember it doesn't use Thai years, it uses Western years. Then the month, the day, the hour, minute, second, and then this is fraction of a second. This is your time zone, which I hope you know that UTC +7 is the Thai time zone. Okay, let's go back one more time and take a look at our goals. We wanted uname, head, tail, touch, and stat. We've run out of time, so in our next video, we're going to look at touch. But at least we got 4 of them completed, which is pretty good. And I don't want to save that modification. It was an error. the rest of the video was correct. I want to thank you for listening and encourage you to come back for our next video when we look at the touch command.